This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hi everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly and it is my pleasure to be here solo today to fly you through another journey of basket casey goodness. Now I am on my own today because Steve, my brother and usual partner in basket casey goodness, is off after back surgery. So this is his fourth time. So the first time was getting in and cleaning out some mucky, disky stuff. The second time was a full spinal fusion. I get that wrong all the time, where they fused L5 and S1. If you've had back problems, you've probably had some L5, S1 problems. That's down the lower back. And then the disc above that was going funky, so they got in and cleaned that out last year. And it didn't last very long, so now he's had the next one done. Things are looking good. So he's up and about and doing very well, but probably not the best to get him on a Basket Case Clubs episode while he's on oxycodone or endone and, hey, man, everything's wonderful. So I figured I'd do a quick episode on my own because today's the 2nd of May today, 2025. And we're at that time of year where we've got some clubs and community organisations getting ready for their AGMs or having just had their AGMs. And so they're at that critical time of the handover. Now, it's so funny how often clubs get the handover wrong. But I don't think it's ever for exactly the same reason. There are some themes of the reasons that they get it wrong, and those are that nobody really knows what needs to be done. People have cracked the shits and left, and they're just not here anymore, and so they're gone, and so there is no handover that people are going to get. Things are in different places, so we don't have good systems for keeping information, documentation, passwords, and so things are going walkabout anyway. But I think it's just we didn't get a good handover ourselves, therefore we don't know how to give a good handover to the next people. I think that's probably the most common challenge that we see faced in, and this is right across the board. So we see this definitely in sport, and sport is a funny, fickle type of industry because you've got the committee members in sports clubs are very often the mums and dads of the junior players who are here for a certain amount of time. They want to get a lot done while they're there or while their kids are there, but then they're gone. And so the speed with which they leave can sometimes also be a contributing factor to why they just don't hang around. We see it also in community organisations for different reasons, and sometimes it's the big fish, little pond syndrome, where we see people in community organisations develop almost a sense of identity based on their position on a club committee in a community organisation, and they don't relinquish it lightly. And so therefore they almost are clinging on to stuff saying, this is my power. And I'm saying this about community orgs. It exists right across the not-for-profit spectrum. This is my power. I've got control. And if I don't give this to anyone, I win. Nobody wins when you behave like that. We see it in student unions and student clubs and societies, and that's really understandable there because there's such a fast turnover. We see club execs in student organisations often there for a year, and it's not even a year. I remember when I was a full-time student and my degree's on the wall over there in front of me, I remember laughing in my final year. I studied a Bachelor of Music with honours, mind you. And because most of it was practical, I just had to spend hours and hours every single day sitting at home playing guitar, which was great for me. It was shit for everyone I lived with. I lived with a bloke who's now an anaesthetist. I lived with a bloke, another brother, Ant, who's a corporate recovery accountant. I lived with an engineer and then an electronics engineer as well. So these are all people studying different things that are far harder than what I'm doing. And they were as jealous as all get up for me just sitting there playing guitar all day, the long-haired hippie playing guitar and having it really easy while they had to study. Of course, they're all in highfalutin careers now and doing very well. And I still get to play guitar. But I remember looking at, it said you're a full-time student. And no shit, I was there for 13 weeks per semester. Now, if you do the maths, a semester's 26 weeks, which is half of 52. So I was there for literally half of the year, 13 and 13, 26 weeks. And I had 10 contact hours a week, and I was a full-time student. So I was kind of part-time even when I was full-time. But, so I started in March. I think you're done by late October, maybe early November for my final year of recital. So the people in student clubs and societies aren't even there a full year. So the turnover is very, very quick. And again, because of the speed of the turnover, the short terms of people in those positions, It's really common that the handover is probably the biggest thing that suffers. What that leads to then, regardless of where we are, and of course we see it in charity groups as well, but regardless of where you are, if you don't give a good handover, then the incoming people don't get any of your legacy. They then find themselves in a position where they're rebuilding the wheel every single year. They're making up new systems and processes. They're developing new spreadsheets for this and that, and not benefiting from any of the work that you've put in. So there are some really simple things that I want to share with you today, and it really all comes down to having a great handover checklist. So if you want a copy of the handover checklist so you don't have to sit there taking notes as I rattle all the things off, just quickly send us an email, pop a note in the chat against wherever you're listening to the podcast, and get in contact with us and we'll shoot you a copy over. It's really simple though. It does not need to be complicated. And I think partly nobody develops a good system because they think, oh, this is going to be super complicated, but it doesn't have to be. It can be really simple. And in fact, the simpler it is, the better. Let me begin, as I often like to do, with a story. So I want you to think back to so this is actually your story. I want you to think back to when you have taken over from a previous outgoing committee. So you're the incoming committee member and you've taken over. And the handover that you got was light on, to be nice. If I was to be nasty about it, I'd say it was just shit. You got nothing. If you were lucky, you got a bag of crumpled receipts. So how did that make you feel? When you took the reins from an outgoing committee, how did you feel when you didn't get any information? You might have come in thinking, oh, great, I'll get copies of previous minutes. I'll be able to see the way the board papers are prepared and circulated before meetings. I'll get a copy of the risk appetite. I'll see bank statements. I'll see trading history. I'll see financial statements and annual reports. I'll see previous president's reports. I'll see all of our reporting obligations to our Consumer Affairs Department, Fair Trading, whatever it is, ASIC, whoever we report to, ACNC. I'll get all of that. It'll all be handed to me. I'll get access all to a drive. I'll be in really quickly. I'll have an induction toolkit. I'll get a whole big folder of stuff. I'll have a confidentiality agreement, and you got nothing. Most people, when I ask this question, who have had that experience, say, it pissed me off. I was so freaking angry with those people. I just wanted to tear them into a million pieces and jump on the bits and keep on jumping until I get tired and then burn them. And I say, did you ever stop and think maybe the first thing you say to those outgoing people should be, thank you? And they go, what? Why would I want to thank them? They screwed me around. They pissed me off. They gave me nothing. I had to do everything myself. Why would I want to thank them? And I say, if you say thank you, and the thank you can even be a thank you card, a good old-fashioned handwritten, because if it's handwritten, it can't be ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot doing it for you. A good old handwritten thank you card that simply says, we would like to acknowledge the work that you've done. It can be a thankless task working as a volunteer on a committee in a club. We acknowledge that you've been through you've put in a lot of time and you've been through some troubling times, some challenging times, and you have made this club what it is today. And for that, we want to say thank you. You've left us in a good position and we're looking forward to building on your legacy. Now, even if they gave you no legacy because they just took off, if you say thank you, you are in a far better position to maybe ask them for help in the future if you need to. So let me now paint the scenario. Let's imagine 6 months down the track, as an incoming committee member, you discover that the club got a grant when the old committee was still in control. You know nothing about this grant. You kind of know a bit about the funded project because it's been going on and you've been signing checks, old school speak for approving bank transfers to pay for this new project that has been grant funded, but you didn't know it was grant funded. And then you get something from the grant agency saying, dear club exec, club committee members, club management committee members, it's time to do your acquittal. And you can't find something, or you don't know something about the grant. You can't find a copy of the application, or you can't find a copy of some receipts that you received. What do? So if you've got to go it alone, then you kind of need to go back to the previous club committee members and say, could I have a copy of what we had, of what you had last time? Can you give me something that will give me some information of where we're up to? Now, if you had been nasty to these people, and even nastiness can only be in your committee room, but you're speaking bad, you're speaking smack about the outgoing committee members, word will get out. Word always gets out. The grapevine in the world of community organisations is a very effective beast. They will know. And then if you go and ask them, hey, can we please have some help? Can we please have some information that you might have for us? They're going to say, you know what? See ya. We don't care. Work it out yourselves. We're gone. If they're even still around. But if you sent them that thank you card and you didn't talk smack about them, even though they pissed you off, it doesn't matter. You have to take up where they left off anyway. You might as well make it easy for yourselves and say, you know what? Thank you. Then when you go to them in 6 months' time and say, they will be much more likely to help you than they will if you just talked smack about them and not said thank you to them. So that's my first piece of advice. When you take over, regardless of if it was a terrific handover or the worst handover you could possibly imagine, say thank you. Acknowledge that it's never an easy task and just say thank you. So there's a few things in this. Why do people not give good handovers? There's all of those reasons before. Why do we not have a good handover system? Because we think it's going to be really hard to develop. And I just don't think it needs to be. So if we were doing this big, kind of on a big scale, I'd be talking about succession planning. But in reality, if you're going to do a plan, make it a strategic plan. Make it a plan that's going to build your business, the business of your community organisation, your sport, your student club, your student union, so that it's a bigger plan, bigger picture plan, looking into the future, maybe upsetting the business model, maybe looking at the way that we have relationships with other clubs like ours in our region, with our peak bodies, with our councils if you're leasing a facility. Because if you have that big picture, then that's guiding your future overall. A succession plan very often doesn't happen because it's another thing to do. It's another plan. God, it's another plan we have to do. We have to do a risk management plan. We've got to do an asset management plan. We've got to do a strategic plan. We might have to do an operational plan. And now you're telling me I have to do a succession plan? Well, I'm not. In a big club or in a big organisation, particularly one where you've got really specialist staff or volunteers. And then in these cases, I think it is important to have a succession plan. It doesn't need to be complicated. And in reality, I want you to think about a good succession plan. What does it look like? Shut your eyes if you like, not if you're driving, listening to the podcast as you're driving. Picture a good succession plan. I don't know about you, but when I shut my eyes, I got nothing. I just got these blank pieces of paper because a really good succession plan doesn't exist in most of the clubs that we've ever worked with. And I don't actually think that's a bad thing. We often have people breathing down our neck saying, you've got to have a succession plan. You've got to, yeah, okay. But it can be really simple. It doesn't need to be some plan that we haven't seen. And for me, I think that the best thing is some really simple things like this handover checklist that I'll run through and some contact details, maybe some dates. That's kind of all we need to be able to say, this is what we need. But in more sophisticated organisations, and it does become super important. So think about the unicorns that you've worked with, those people who might be able to do, let's just take finance. They can do the reconciliations. They can do the invoicing. They can do the accounts receivable. They can be chasing up debtors. They can be maintaining credited days so that everything's on track. They can be putting together the financial statements. They understand the balance sheet, but they're also then doing the budget. And they can also do payroll and manage the hobby form, the statement by a supplier form. So they're doing everything. Now, if that person was to go because they know so much about who we're paying on a statement by a supplier, who might be a part-time, full-time casual employee that has superannuation and entitlements, they know everything. So they're going to be hard to replace. If they go, that one person, so it's not necessarily the job in this case, it's the knowledge that that person has got. They've developed it over maybe decades. If they go, now that might be that they get sick and stop working. They might drop off the perch. They might win the lotto and move to Majorca. They might get a really, really good job offer. They might start a business of their own. The little side hustle they've been working might take off and they leave. It's really important that you acknowledge any of those unicorns and have a plan to replace them. Now, in some cases, you're not going to be able to replace a unicorn with one person because the unicorns are hard to find and it's taken time for them to develop. So you might need to identify all of the skills that these people bring. And this is certainly the case in the different types of marketing that clubs are doing. You might need multiple people to take on chunks of the work that they're doing. So That's when I think it's important to have a succession plan. Your senior leadership team. So if you've got a general manager, for instance, what are the skills that they've got and what are their duties that really take kind of more than just a surface level knowledge of the club. So not anyone could step up and do that job. That's where it's really important to acknowledge those positions and actually document what those skills are and what you would do if that person left. So where you've got what I call a single point failure risk, so where if one person goes, that could be a single point failure and the whole business of your club could fall because of that person going, that's the point to get specific. And that's the point to then say, okay, so what are the skills that this person has? What are the duties that this person has? And what are we going to need to replace this person? That's as simple as it needs to be. You don't need to develop a really sophisticated spreadsheet to do it. You can just do it in any old doc. Maybe a bit more sophisticated than the back of a napkin for this one, but it does not need to be complicated. But that's where I think it's really important that you do it. For everyone else, however, I think it mainly comes down to having a really good approach to succession rather than a succession document or a succession plan in some level of detail. So what does that approach to succession look like? What does the approach to the handover look like? Well, funnily enough, succession begins when you begin, not when you're trying to get out. A big mistake that we see is that volunteers leave it until the very end, until very close to when they're going to go. So even in the lead up to the AGM at which they're standing down, before they start to consider, what are we going to do to replace me? And that's when they start to really fret or just, sit back, cross their arms and go, well, I'm out of here, don't really care anyway. Finding your replacement should actually begin when you begin. And it's not just tapping people on the shoulder to go and find who might be the person or people who can replace me. But what are the things that we need to set up so that when I hand over, it's going to be really easy to hand over? So in that handover that you got, if you didn't get systems, if you didn't get processes, if you didn't get a risk appetite, if you didn't get a good system for board papers being distributed well in advance of the management committee or board meeting, start developing them, document them well, and in a way that can be handed over. Look, this is important from the perspective of, remember the old saying, the best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best day is today. This is exactly the same. If you can't go back to the start and begin your job again, then at least now's the time to get in and have a crack and say, right, okay, so I haven't done it up to now, but I'm going to start now. Just a little bit. It's kind of like doing your finances. If you do them and your reconciliations as you're going along, then come BAS time, it's easy. But if you don't do anything and you're scrambling around on the 28th of the month following the end of the quarter looking for crumpled up receipts, then you're in trouble. Then it's going to be hard and you're going to end up crying on the phone to the bookkeeper or accountant. We don't want that. Same thing is here. It's going to be awkward at handover time if you haven't left a legacy. Another thing to think about, though, is when you step down and hand over to somebody else, another really good reason for establishing great systems, great processes, and a great leadership culture, if we're talking about a committee position, is that if you're staying on in that club, whatever you set up, you're going to have to sit in that when you've gone. So if you didn't like what you saw, what you were sitting in before you took control, then as a leader, you can change things. You can change the way that committee meetings run if you want to. You can streamline them. You can change the shape and nature of the management committee if you need to, subject obviously to what's in the Constitution. That you can make changes. You can set up systems and processes that make your life easy, but they will also make the lives of incoming committee members easy. But when that happens, then the culture that you set as a leader in the leadership team, the management committee or board, then propagates. It then continues when you've gone so that the whole club has a better feel, a better culture and is more efficient because we've got great leadership where everyone's then able to focus on the right things. So then when you go back to sitting in the constituency, you go, this feels much better. You have the ability to set that up and to do it nice and early. So if you didn't get to do that at the beginning, do it now. I'm also going to give you a way that I think is really powerful for staying in your job. A big challenge in handing over a position, I'll take president, a big difficulty in handing over the position of president is that because it's not necessarily well defined what it includes, but more importantly what it excludes, then we find that it's a hard job to give away. Because just by default, it has just absorbed all manner of tasks and all manner of duties that now become part of the perception of the role of president. So when you go to say, hey, would somebody else like this job? They look at everything you've taken on as president, everything you've said yes to that maybe you should have said no to, and they go, I don't want that job. I don't have that amount of time. Like, I'm not going to commit to that. You might have. I can't. So how do we control that? And again, like a tree, do this on day one. The best time to do it is as you are nominated or elected into the position. And the way to do it really specifically is you can stand up at the front of the room after being elected or nominated and say, it is an honour and a privilege to have been elected or considered for election to the position of president of this club. This club means a lot to me. It's a part of who I am. It's a part of my culture. It's a part of my soul. I love it and I love you guys. My job as president, and here it is, this is where you define it, and I believe that every job should be able to be defined down to two dot points. My job as president is to chair the meetings. What that means is that I need to be at all of the meetings. So that means management committee meetings, it means general meetings, it means members' forums, and it means any subcommittee meetings where I'm a member as well. So as president, it's going to be logical that I'm probably on the Finance, Risk and Audit Committee, I'm probably on the Governance Committee, and I'm probably going to be on the HR Committee. So there's a lot of meetings that I need to go to, and the ones where I am chair, I need to chair those meetings. So that takes considerable time. Not only is it time in the meeting, it's all of the prep time as well, because as you all know, the better you prepare for a meeting, the better that meeting runs. Secondly is to be the ambassador for this wonderful club of ours. What that means is that if this club needs to go and advocate for some funding in a political campaign, for instance, so we've got an election tomorrow, a federal election tomorrow. So if our club needs to go and be advocating to the political leaders of the political candidates on both sides of the political fence, then I need to do that as ambassador. If there's a meeting that we need to have with council over something like tenure, if there's an accident or if there's a reason that somebody needs to be facing the media or even the coroner, then as ambassador of the club, I need to be able to do that. Those 2 points are a big job. But what that means is that if you come to me through the year and you say, hey, Michael, can you take on this other thing? You can say, you've now, and you can say this in your welcome onboarding acceptance speech. You can say, please understand that today you are giving me the permission to say no. Now, when that happens, you can say, you don't have to actually say no. You can say, look, Steve, that's a wonderful idea that you've presented. Now, remember at the AGM when I said that my job was to chair the meetings and be the ambassador, so that I can do both of those things really well for the benefit of the club, I need to devote my effort to those things. So while that means that I can't take on what you've suggested, I think it's a great idea. How else do you think you could make that happen? I didn't say no, and I gave ownership back to the person who tried to give it to me. So how often have you heard things, oh, that committee, they should, you should. Like, you get elected to a position of authority and people should all over you. You should. You don't have to. It's up to you to be able to say, great idea, how are you going to make that happen? And if you've given yourself the permission to say no in front of everyone, and you can say, remember at the AGM when I said, okay, so remember that you can't plant a tree 20 years ago, you can still do it now. So in your next communication, and it would be great if you do a little piece to camera video to share with your members about this, share some updates, share some wins, and share part of your role. Maybe just a little bit of each of those two positions in each of those videos that you do. And I'm really only just spitballing that as I go so that I'm reiterating the importance of that sort of communication. But that means that you're able to constrain your job. So look, it's probably going into more the jobs of the individual jobs of committee members than succession planning in general, but it's a massively important part of it. Because if you get that bit right, all of those discussions that you're having where technically you're saying no, you're empowering other people, you're creating leaders in other people who might be the exact sort of people you want to take over from you in the future. Also, by constraining the job that you've got, you're making it far easier to give to somebody else. Notice though, when you are defining every job as only 2 dot points, you're still leaving room for growth, or you're still leaving room for creative flair for the people who are stepping into those jobs. Okay, so that's the president. What would I do for the other positions then? The other positions, well, let's say vice president. Now, because the vice president, if the president is always present, doesn't get to chair meetings, the first part of their role is understudy the president. But if the president's always there, the next part, and I think this is really important, let's be the vice president, be the strategic keeper on trackerer. So this is the person who keeps the club on its strategic path. The third position, let's say, call that secretary. Now, secretary can be, and it used to be a massive job when we used to have to go to the post office twice a week to collect the mail and do incoming and outgoing correspondence. Now it tends to be a simpler task because everything is managed electronically. So let's say that the role of the secretary is to manage meetings and manage communications. Again, lots of scope for flair in there. And in that one, we might also manage compliance reporting obligations as well, but that's kind of shared between the secretary and the treasurer, the next position. So the 2 dot points for the treasurer, nice and simple. All of the over-the-shoulder rear view mirror, what have we done reporting from finances in the past, and more importantly and more strategically, what's the future look like? So, in my car, my rear view mirror, it's tiny, it's only about that big, but my windscreen's that big, and because where I'm going is actually more important than where I've been. So if you take that approach from a financial treasury perspective as well, okay, where we've been says how we did last month or last reporting period, where we're going is even more important. So that's why the budget is so important there. So to be able to scope each of the jobs down to 2 nice, simple, easy, quick dot points actually makes life really easy, and it makes it easy to hand things over as well. So that now brings me to the sorts of things that I think that we should have on this miraculous handover checklist. So I've got one in front of me that I'm going to run through very quickly, and as I said, we're very happy to share a copy of this. But there's basically different styles of documents and things that we need to hand over. So we've got compliance stuff, we've got access issues, we've got financial stuff, and we've got operational stuff. So from a compliance perspective, we've got things like the Constitution. If you've also got bylaws, then have a copy of those. But in the handover, it's a great idea to actually walk through any of the important bits. Then we've got some money stuff. So financial records. How have we done financially? Profit and loss, P&L, cash flow statement if you've got them. And have a few years there so you can start to monitor trends as well. So that any incoming people, and this is not just for treasurers, by the way, any incoming people can see the trends, can see how things have been going, and create some expectations of how things are likely to move in the future. Bank accounts, really important because you need to most likely actually go to the bank, do your 100-point check to get authorised, and then have the minutes of the AGM where you were voted in to do that transition of signatories on the account. It's a good idea also if you have a list, this asset register thing, what is it that the club owns? So what have we got as far as club assets, club property and inventory? So what have we got as far as stock on hand? Then we get into the more general club documents and templates. So what is our document storage system? And now in the old days, this used to be shoeboxes full of stuff, filing cabinets full of stuff. Ideally now you've moved to the cloud. So it's literally just authorizing another user and then cancelling the authorization of the outgoing members, and everything's there. But again, in the handover process, walk through what's there. Go through some previous minute meetings. Previous meeting minutes of meetings, general meetings and management committee meetings, and how have members' forums been going? So remember in a previous episode where we talked about the different types of meetings, how have those meetings been going? How do they run? What are some pits or traps to look out for so that we can make sure that we're continuing what good meeting culture we've been able to set up? A really important one, and I said dates, is what are the important dates that we've got coming up? So a calendar of events, but an event might be a tournament or a carnival, end of season, beginning of season, but it also includes trigger dates. So if a date is the start of the season, then what's the date by which we must have organised our uniforms for next year? For instance, if we've got an end of season event coming up, what are the dates leading up to that we need to have organised the portaloos and organised the amusement rides if we've got them, organised the food trucks if we're having them, organised the officials to come in, organised authority from council to lock gates, all of those sorts of things. So that's what the calendar of events should include. There might be other dates like when you've got to have your reaffiliation process done. When you get into some of the general stuff, it's good to talk about what worked well and what should change. So these are, if you're basically keeping a journal, even if it's just a mental journal of the stuff that went really well and the stuff that if you had your time again, you'd do differently, share that on your exit and ask for that as you're incoming. And again, 20 years ago, we can't go back to and do your handover again. But if you do have a relationship with the former treasurer or treasurers, go and see them and say, hey, can I spend some time with you to ask what went really well when you were treasurer? And if you had your time again, what would you do differently? Now, you may already have implemented new systems that have changed those things that should change, but you might still learn something. So that's really important. Then we've got contact details. So the most important ones for roles where I've been are things like, remember I said the amusement rides and the food trucks and the Portaloo guy. Who are those people? Can I have those contact details, please? If you've got some good ins at council so you can short circuit to find exactly the right person you need to talk to for a maintenance issue or a grant application for permission to do things, hand those details over or ask for those details as well. So I just want to jump back to the login credentials. So the list of things here has grown. So remember that you're going to need access to the website, access to email. You'll need your own email address, whatever social media accounts you've got, the cloud file storage, and then any other subscription. So you might have a Canva subscription, a MailChimp subscription, a CRM subscription, your competition management system subscription, your membership management system subscription, Xero, MyOb, QuickBooks, whatever your financial management system is. So you'll need all of these to be set up. So think as laterally as you can and look through the subscription list. Ideally in your financials, you'll see who you're paying subscriptions to. So make sure you're getting access to each of those. And that's a good point to go to know, well, where do I look? Because you'll be paying invoices for all of these subscriptions, that's the place to go. I suppose it makes it a bit tricky when they're only free accounts as well. But then there's two parts to that. There's updating your access, but then remember to remove access from those people who are no longer involved. And this is really important because you have made privacy promises to your people. So it's important that you uphold those privacy promises by actually doing the step to remove people once they've gone. And then we talk about relationships. So relationships, I've mentioned some relationships with people like the people at council, but what about your sponsors? What about other supporters? What about politicians, so your local councillors, state and federal MPs? What are these sorts of relationships? What are the relationships we've got with our sponsors as far as servicing arrangements go? In having these discussions, you're also going to be thinking strategically about ways to improve. So just by going through that list, I'm thinking, there were some good ideas in there about sponsorship and maybe making sponsorship better. Anyway, that's a simple handover checklist. And the final thing I want to talk about is maybe something that you can consider for the longer term because it involves a change to the Constitution. At the moment, you're probably in a situation where you were voted in and even before the AGM finished, the old people left and you took over and even chaired the rest of the meeting. Now, I don't like that because depending on what's still on the agenda, if the old treasurer is gone and the new treasurer comes in, well, shouldn't it have been the old treasurer who presented the financials if that happens after the election? So that kind of seems a bit absurd. So it's a better idea, at the very least, to have the outgoing committee continue until the end of the AGM and then the incoming committee start then. But I got a better idea, and this won't work in every case. But if you want to have some structural support to making sure that you're giving yourself the best chance of a handover, then why not stagger the incoming and outgoing committees? So we could have the AGM, but we could say in our Constitution, the term of office doesn't end at the election, doesn't end at the end of the AGM. It ends a month after that. So how about a 1 month transition where these guys are actually still in office for another month, but then you've got your president-elect, your vice president-elect, your secretary-elect, and your treasurer-elect, and any other management committee positions as well, with a month where they can shadow the outgoing people. Now, it's not necessarily going to solve the problem of somebody who gets voted out and chucks their toys out of the cot and pisses off and says, well, screw you guys, I'm going home, and you don't see them again. But structure, so you're not going to fix that, and that does happen, and it will continue to happen because of the amount of personal and emotional involvement people have with their clubs. But at least it gives you some structural reason to say, this is an option worth thinking about. Anyway, that is food for thought and something that I'd like you to at least discuss with your committees and, of course, discuss with us. So we love having these sorts of discussions because it gets beyond just the day-to-day, but it's also beyond anything you'll read in any textbook. And that comes from our 28 years of experience of doing this, of working with people just like you. So if you've obviously not connected with us on social media and on our website, make sure you do so. But I've got an ask. Now, it's a very simple ask. Often I'll say, go and leave us a review and be nice to us. This one, I actually want you to share the podcast with somebody that you know. So think of who else you know right now. Think of somebody that you know who's in another club. who might not listen to basket case clubs, but who you might have had a discussion about all of the crap that they've gone through and all of the crap that you've gone through. And all I ask is share it with them. Now, the reason I ask is, it doesn't make a difference to my ego that somebody else is listening, but the content of our podcast and the content of our free webinars and our newsletters is all to give as much as we can away for free. Like I've said a lot of times, I want to die with no secrets. So I want to share this with you. But if you can help us connect with other people and share it with them as well, then their volunteering journey becomes better. And even if they're on a paid path as a general manager in a golf club, for instance, please share it with them, because anything that we say that can help, that we are trying to help club committee members, then staff in councils, in peak bodies, in clubs themselves, in student unions, in charities, in community organisations, then you can help others as well. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Thanks very much. I'm looking forward to having Steve back. Hopefully, Steve back. Get it? Pun there. Anyway, Steve's back next time. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.